"I'd sooner die than belong to you," the Apache woman said. When the cowboy sliced through her chains at dawn, the desert lay wide and unforgiving, stretching into forever, swallowing every sound except the low moan of wind drifting between the canyon walls. The cowboy rode alone, a man burdened with too many memories and not enough tomorrows. His horse's hooves beat against the hard earth in a rhythm echoing his own heartbeat, slow, worn, but steady. He had witnessed enough carnage and betrayal to believe peace was a lie. Still, he rode on, pursuing something he couldn't name. The sun had barely climbed the sky when he reached the charred remains of a camp. Smoke clung to the air. The sand was dark with ashes and stories. He stepped down from his horse, scanning the wreckage with care. That's when he saw her, chained to a post, half swallowed by shadow, wrists raw and bleeding against cold iron. She was young, her long black hair matted with dust. Her face held faint markings of her tribe, but her eyes were not those of someone defeated. They burned with fury, pride, and something even more dangerous, unbroken dignity. The cowboy halted, watching her breathe, slow and even, like someone who had already made peace with dying. The men who had left her there were long gone, certain she would never be discovered. He stepped closer, boots crunching over gravel. She didn't flinch. When he knelt and met her gaze, he found no fear, only challenge. Without speaking, he drew a knife from his belt and severed the chain anchoring her to the post. She offered no thanks. She didn't even shift. He gestured toward his horse, offering water. She examined him, lips cracked, eyes sharp with blame. At last, she accepted the flask, took a few small sips, then turned away. He sensed how much he despised needing help, but thirst allowed no pride. He wasn't talkative. Words weren't his skill. But as the sun climbed high and the burning sand scorched their boots, he understood he couldn't simply abandon her. They walked in silence for miles. Every time he considered speaking, her quietness spoke louder. When darkness arrived, he built a fire and offered food. She ate without meeting his eyes. Her hands shook with fatigue, yet she never dropped her gaze to the ground. He noticed how she kept watching the distance, as if expecting someone from her tribe to rise out of the night. But he understood the truth. No one would. 2 days passed like this. The cowboy began to grasp her silence. It wasn't pride. It was mourning. She had lost her people. Maybe her family. Maybe everyone. Her heart lay buried somewhere in that scorched camp, though her spirit still refused to die. On the 3rd day, they reached a deserted outpost near the canyon's edge. He halted the horse and looked at her. "You can rest here tonight," he said quietly. She gave no reply. The cuffs still clung to her wrists, a brutal reminder of what she had survived. He paused, then stepped toward her. She shifted back a little, her muscles tight, ready to strike. "Easy," he whispered, lifting his hand slowly toward the chain. She didn't resist as he grasped the metal and turned it. The lock snapped with a muted click, falling open. The sound was small, yet it rolled through the still air like thunder. She stared at her unbound wrists, then at him. For a brief instant, a shimmer of gratitude crossed her eyes. Then it vanished. She lifted her chin and spoke for the first time, her voice shaking but unyielding. "I'd rather die than be yours." The sentence struck him harder than any gunshot. He stood frozen, the broken chain hanging useless from his fingers. He wished he could tell her he didn't want to claim her, only to undo what had been done. But the words stuck in his throat. She turned away, spine straight, her pride gleaming like tempered steel in the sun. He understood then she wasn't merely a woman released from bondage. She was a living form of something sacred. Freedom itself. He said nothing as she walked a few steps away, gazing into the desert as if she already saw the world she had lost rising before her. The cowboy bent, picked up the shattered lock, and flung it aside. He didn't call after her. He simply watched until her stride weakened, her body trembling from fatigue. It dawned on him then that she was fleeing not just him, but everything that carried the weight of her suffering. That night, she never closed her eyes. He saw her shape beside the dying fire, hands brushing her sore wrists, flames reflecting in her stare. He wanted to tell her she was safe, yet he sensed safety wasn't what she sought. She wanted her honor, her justice, her homeland, things no man could return. As dawn's first light touched the canyon walls, she glanced at him briefly. Her expression softened for the smallest heartbeat before she turned back toward the horizon. He didn't realize it then, but those words, "I'd rather die than be yours," would carve themselves into his memory forever, shaping everything that lay ahead. By the time the sun climbed high again, the cowboy had chosen to trail her from afar. She didn't want his help, yet he knew the desert showed mercy to no one. He watched her stagger through the sand, stubborn but fading. When she finally collapsed near a dead riverbed, he approached quietly, lifting her with care and offering water. She tried to shove his hands away, but her strength had drained. Her eyes locked with his, still fierce, but now stripped of hatred, replaced by nothing but exhaustion. He carried her into the shade and waited until her eyes fluttered open again. When she woke, she spoke her name at last. "Niley." He repeated it softly, the sound strange but lovely on his tongue. In broken English, she shared fragments of her past. Her home burned, her brother slain, her people scattered. The men who chained her had destroyed everything she held dear. The cowboy sat still, guilt gnawing into him. Not long ago, he had ridden with men capable of the same cruelty. He left them only because he could no longer endure the cries. He didn't tell her. Some truths were too heavy to speak. Days drifted into weeks. They traveled together, neither companions nor foes, just two survivors tied by the same unforgiving land. At times she hummed a song from her people, low and haunting. At times he listened to the wind and wondered if this was what redemption might feel like. Gradually, the silence between them softened into understanding. He taught her to use a revolver. She taught him to read the earth, where the snakes hid, how to find water in the driest soil. Trust grew between them, although neither would ever admit it aloud. One night, camped beneath the cliffs, she asked why he saved her. He stared at the flames and said, "Because I couldn't watch another soul die for nothing." She studied him for a long time, then whispered, "No one saves without reason." He didn't reply. Their fragile peace cracked. One evening, when bounty hunters tracked them down, gunfire tore through the stillness. The cowboy drew instantly, shoving Niley behind a boulder. She fought at his side, rifle steady, eyes blazing. They fought like colliding storms, each shot ringing with fury and defiance. He took one bullet, then another, but continued firing until the last hunter fell. When the battle ended, the world went quiet again, except for his uneven breaths. Niley knelt beside him, pressing her hands against his wounds. He looked up at her, the woman who once swore she'd rather die than be his, and managed a faint smile. "Looks like I'm yours now," he whispered. Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head gently. "No," she murmured. "You are free." He smiled again, weaker. "So are you." His eyes closed, and with the rising sun, his breath slipped away. She stayed beside him for a long while, the wind lifting strands of her hair across his still face. When she finally laid him to rest near the canyon, she placed a broken chain on his grave, not as a symbol of him owning her, but of what he had broken within himself. Niley stood there for hours, her shadow stretching across the sand. Then she turned and walked toward the horizon. She didn't look back. Her steps were sure, her heart wounded but strong. She was free, not because he freed her, but because she had never allowed her soul to be claimed. The wind carried her song through the valley, the same one she had sung beside the fire, echoing along the stone walls. And in that song lived the memory of the man who tried to return what the world had stolen from her, her freedom, her pride, her right to choose her path. She faded into the golden light, leaving behind only silence, a grave, and a legend born from pain and courage. The tale of the woman who said, "I'd rather die than be yours," and meant it with every beat of a spirit that refused to bow to anyone.